Blue spruce can be a focal point in anybody's yard, especially when we have a tree this large. But occasionally people will see branches dying out on blue spruces and they become very concerned. After all, it took a long time to get a tree up to this size, and when branches start to die back, they're afraid they're going to lose the entire tree. They want to know what's wrong and what they can do about it. This is a disease that we call cytospora canker. Cytospora is a fungus that can be found very commonly in the landscape, and in fact it's a natural inhabitant on the surface of the tree, but normally it won't cause disease until the tree is under drought stress. It's fairly easy to diagnose, but I want to show you the symptoms so that you can do a positive diagnosis quickly. The typical symptom of cytospora canker is that you have branches dead on the tree, but they're often scattered. They might be low on the tree, or they might be a middle branch on the tree. Occasionally they're high, but mostly they're middle or lower branches. The other thing to notice is that the entire branch end is dead. It's not just brown needles. The branch tips are dead. Then, as you look farther back on the branch, you'll notice that it's even dead back into here, and here's a real good symptom. The canker has formed in this area, the wood has been killed and shrunken, and that starts to crack open and resin begins to flow out. So the fungus is active right in there. And in fact, if we pull this down even farther, you can see this branch is not yet dead, but here the resin's beginning to flow, and so the fungus is active right here, and eventually that area is going to be killed. Now, the fungus tends to be able to girdle these smaller branches within a year or so. They'll move into the bigger branches, and it might take a couple of years to actually kill this larger branch, but eventually it will. Now, as I mentioned, plants that are most susceptible are ones under drought stress, and in fact, trees, blue spruce of all ages are susceptible, but it seems as though it's these larger trees that eventually outgrow the site's ability to supply water. Then they come under drought stress and the fungus begins to form the canker. Apparently the fungus can get in any natural wounds or openings, but until the tree is under drought stress, you don't see any symptoms. Now, one thing you have to watch out for is you will see dead tips on branches occasionally, and has nothing to do with cytospora canker. And here's a good example up here. This is actually a gall that's caused by an insect called the Cooley spruce gall adelgid. And you can see it killed the tip, and it formed a real gall. In fact, it almost looks like it's a cone, but it's not. It's where the insect laid its eggs, and then the young hatched out and moved on. But the tip bends down and dies. Yet the rest of the branch is fine. It's when you see these major branches beginning to die out, that's when you start looking for the resin flow. Now, this is a fungus, and it does form fruiting structures. It will form fungal fruiting structures, but it'll be very difficult to find them. The fruiting structures are dark brown dots on the branches, and this bark is so rough you won't be able to find the fungal fruiting structures. What you'll have to do, if you want to really confirm that the cytospora is there, and you don't want to just go by the entire tip is dead and this resin flow, you'd have to cut this out, wash that off, and put it in a paper bag on a wet paper towel, and then spores will begin to ooze up, and they'll look like sort of creamy white masses of spores coming out of the fruiting structures. But when you see symptoms like this, and especially when you see the resin flow in the slightly sunken area, you can be pretty certain that it's cytospora canker. Now, the problem with this is this branch is entirely dead, and if you're going to control the disease, the only way you can go about it is to prune out the dead branch so that you remove that fungus from the tree. The fungus will continue to move up the tree and kill more and more branches. And since the branch is dead, you might as well prune it off anyway. There aren't any chemicals to control the disease, partly because the fungus is a natural inhabitant on the tree, and there's no way you can keep a fungicide on the tree all year round, 365 days a year, to protect the tree. So all that you can do is prune it out. Now, the other thing is, when you're planting spruce, especially blue spruce, you should consider the site. and think about whether the site is going to be able to supply the water for a 50 or 60 foot tall specimen. Also, you don't want to plant too many other woody plants close to it to compete for the water. There's one public garden in Pennsylvania that decided to irrigate their spruces and other evergreens through the summer. And the trees grew tremendously, and they never realized how much competition there was for water. And spruce really do use a lot of water. They're evergreens, they're using it all year round, and you don't know when they're under drought stress because they don't wilt. All you can do is watch the other trees around it, the broadleaf trees, to see when they're wilting. When you start seeing wilting on those trees, or if you're watching your weather and it's obvious that you're in a drought condition, you should seriously consider watering the blue spruce. Now, blue spruce are very susceptible, yet sometimes you'll see lines of spruce where maybe only 1 or 2 trees are infected and others are not. Now, people will ask why that occurs. Well, spruce trees are not clones. They're not all the same. They come from a seed source, and there's a lot of variation in spruce. So there is some individual trees that have some resistance. So that's why you won't see all the trees in a row showing the disease. The other thing is that chance plays a big role in plant diseases, and just by chance, one tree may have the disease and the one right next to it may not. To avoid the problem, if you want large trees and you're afraid of this disease on blue spruce causing this kind of damage on an older tree, you can plant other types of spruce, for example, Norway spruce, or you can plant hemlocks. Now, they are susceptible to cytospora canker, but not nearly as susceptible as blue spruce.